I raised my wine glass and looked straight into my husband's eyes, and his mistress's. As I said, I think we should combine tables. After all, we're practically family now. And that was the moment my 17-year marriage shattered beneath the stunned silence of an entire restaurant. But what I did next left everyone speechless. Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rise from the pain of betrayal. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Rachel, and I'm 41 years old. I teach business management at the University of Denver, where I've built a career talking about strategy, planning, and calculated risks. Funny how those skills would come to serve me in ways I never imagined. Daniel and I had been married for 17 years. On paper, we were the couple everyone envied. He was a successful corporate lawyer at one of Denver's most prestigious firms. We lived in a beautiful colonial house in Cherry Creek, took vacations to Europe every summer, and hosted dinner parties where our friends would joke about us being relationship goals. But marriages don't die in dramatic explosions. They suffocate slowly, one missed goodnight kiss at a time. It started with small things. Daniel would come home later, always with perfectly reasonable explanations about client dinners or case preparations. His shirt smelled different, not just of cologne, but of something floral and unfamiliar. When I'd lean in for a hug, his body would stiffen slightly, like I was invading his personal space. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me now pecked my cheek like we were distant relatives at a family reunion. I told myself I was being paranoid. Work stress does things to people. We were both busy professionals. This was just a phase that long-term couples go through. I buried myself deeper in lesson plans and faculty meetings, pretending the growing distance between us was normal. But then came the Saturday mornings when he'd suddenly need to go into the office. The phone calls he'd take in the garage, the way he'd angle his laptop screen away from me when working from home. Each red flag waved frantically in my face, but I was too afraid to look directly at them. My mother used to say that women always know. Deep down, in that primitive part of our brains that kept our ancestors alive, we always know when something's wrong. I spent months silencing that voice, drowning it in wine and Netflix and conversations with friends about anything except my marriage. One Thursday evening changed everything. Daniel was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just a simple notification preview on the screen. Reservation confirmed for 2 at Lumiere. Window table as requested. She'll love it. My heart didn't race. It stopped, then restarted with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The password to his phone was still our wedding date, October 15th. Some might call that ironic. I call it lazy. Or maybe, deep down, he wanted to get caught. What I found made me sink onto our bed, gripping his phone with trembling hands. Messages, hundreds of them. Photos, videos, a year's worth of another life my husband had been living. Her name was Madison, and she worked in his firm's communications department. 28 years old, with long auburn hair and a laugh that, according to his messages, lit up his whole world. I scrolled through their conversation with the detached fascination of someone watching a car accident. The progression from professional to personal to intimate. The first accidental lunch. The conference in Chicago where it became physical. The promises that they'd figure out their situation soon. I sat there for 20 minutes, reading the destruction of my marriage in real time, water still running in the shower. When Daniel finally emerged, towel around his waist, humming some tune, I had already locked his phone and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, barely glancing at me as he searched for his pajamas. "Perfect," I replied. And I meant it. Because in that moment, I wasn't angry or hysterical or broken. I was awake. For the first time in months, I was completely, crystallinely awake. "I'm thinking of trying that new Korean place for lunch tomorrow with Susan," I said casually, watching him in the mirror. "Sounds good," he replied, already mentally somewhere else. Probably thinking about his window table at Lumiere. That night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made my plans. Not for revenge. That's too simple a word. I planned for truth. And truth, I was about to learn, is the sharpest weapon of all. The next morning, I kissed Daniel goodbye with the same practiced smile I'd perfected over months of pretending. He tasted like coffee and deception. As his car pulled out of our driveway, I called the university and requested 3 personal days. My voice was steady, professional. No one would suspect that Rachel Chen was about to detonate her own life. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw his belongings onto the lawn like they do in movies. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and opened my laptop. If Daniel thought he was married to a predictable suburban wife, he'd forgotten who I really was. A woman who'd earned her PhD while working full-time, who'd climbed academic ladders in a male-dominated field, who'd learned long ago that information is power. Madison Brooks. Within an hour, I knew everything about her. University of Oregon graduate, originally from Portland, engaged to Nathan Brooks, she'd kept her maiden name professionally, a software engineer at a tech startup downtown. Their wedding website was still active. Madison and Nathan's Mountain Romance, complete with engagement photos taken at Rocky Mountain National Park. The wedding had been planned for last September, but mysteriously postponed. Now I knew why. I found Nathan's LinkedIn, his Instagram, his running blog where he documented training for marathons. He seemed kind, the type who posted photos of rescue dogs and sunrises. He deserved to know what his fiancée was doing with her Tuesday evenings and lunch breaks. But I wouldn't be cruel about it. Cruelty is for people who act from pain. I was acting from clarity. I spent the weekend as normally as possible. Daniel and I went to our usual farmer's market on Saturday. We had brunch with his parents on Sunday. I laughed at his father's jokes, complimented his mother's new haircut, and played the role of devoted wife with an Oscar-worthy performance. All the while, I was finalizing my plan. Lumiere was booked solid for weeks. I'd checked. The only way Daniel had gotten a reservation was through his firm's connections. But I had connections too. The restaurant's event coordinator was married to one of my former students. A few phone calls later, I had what I needed. A table for 2, right next to the window table Daniel had reserved for Tuesday night. The hardest part was reaching out to Nathan. I couldn't just cold call him with devastating news. Instead, I sent a professional email from my university address. Mr. Brooks, I'm conducting research on tech industry innovation and would love to discuss your company's approach to software development. Would you be available for dinner on Tuesday? I have a reservation at Lumiere at 7:30 p.m. His response was enthusiastic. Of course, he'd love to discuss his work. He even thanked me for choosing such a nice restaurant. He'd been wanting to try it. Tuesday arrived like a perfectly timed storm. Daniel left that morning in his best suit, the charcoal one I'd bought him for his birthday. He mentioned working late, possibly grabbing dinner with clients. The lie rolled off his tongue like water. "Don't wait up," he said, pecking my cheek. "I won't," I promised, and for once I was telling the truth. I spent the day preparing. Not my appearance. That would come later. I prepared my mind, my heart, my resolve. I meditated, something I hadn't done since graduate school. I wrote in my journal, documenting not just the facts, but how I felt about them. The anger was there, yes, but underneath it was something else. Relief. The gaslighting was over. The self-doubt, the wondering if I was imagining things, the feeling crazy for noticing changes, all of it was ending tonight. At 5 p.m., I began getting ready. I chose the red dress Daniel had once said was too much for a faculty dinner. I wore the diamond earrings I'd bought myself after getting tenure, the ones he'd said were excessive. My wedding ring stayed in its box on the dresser. As I drove to Lumiere, I didn't rehearse what I would say. The truth doesn't need rehearsal. It simply needs to be released. Nathan was already waiting when I arrived, looking nervous but pleased in his blue button-down. He stood when he saw me, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Professor Chen, thank you so much for this opportunity." I shook his hand, noting the silver wedding band on his finger. "Please, call me Rachel, and thank you for coming. I think tonight is going to be very educational." Lumiere was exactly the kind of restaurant Daniel would choose for an affair. Intimate lighting, discreet alcoves, and prices that whispered special occasion. Nathan and I were seated at a corner table with a perfect view of the entrance and, more importantly, the window table that sat empty, waiting like a stage for tonight's performance. "This is really generous of you," Nathan said, scanning the menu. "Most professors just want to meet at Starbucks." I smiled, sipping my water. I believe important conversations deserve the right setting. We talked about his work, genuinely, at first. Nathan was passionate about sustainable technology, about coding solutions for environmental problems. He was brilliant, kind, and completely unaware that his world was about to shatter, just like mine had 5 days ago. At 7:26, I saw Daniel's BMW pull into the valet area. My pulse quickened, but my hands remained steady on my wine glass. "Nathan," I said quietly, "I need to prepare you for something. This dinner isn't entirely about your work." His face shifted from confusion to concern. "I don't understand." "You will, in about 3 minutes. I'm going to ask you to trust me, and I promise I'll explain everything." At 7:29, they walked in. Daniel moved with the confidence of a man who believed his secret was safe, his hand resting on the small of Madison's back as the hostess led them to their table. Madison wore a black cocktail dress that hugged her athletic frame. Her hair swept up to reveal the pearl earrings that, I now realized, Daniel had lost from his grandmother's collection last Christmas. The moment Daniel saw me, his face went through a spectacular range of emotions. Surprise, confusion, fear, understanding, all in the span of 2 seconds. Madison followed his gaze and froze like a deer in headlights. I raised my wine glass slightly, the smallest of acknowledgments. Then I turned back to Nathan, who had followed my gaze and was now staring at his fiancée with growing bewilderment. "Nathan," I said gently, "I'd like you to meet my husband, Daniel." The restaurant's ambiance, soft jazz, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, continued around us, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated at 2 tables. Daniel stood frozen, halfway to his seat. Madison's hand flew to her throat. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "Madison?" She turned to him, her face crumbling. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" "Having dinner with Professor Chen," he said slowly, his engineer's mind clearly trying to process incompatible data. "What are you doing here? You said you had a work event." I stood, smoothing my red dress. "I think perhaps we should combine tables. After all, we're practically family now." Daniel finally found his voice. "Rachel, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed. Not cruelly, just genuinely amused. "Daniel, that's such a cliché. You're a lawyer. Surely you can do better than that." The maitre d' appeared, sensing drama with the supernatural ability of high-end restaurant staff. I smiled pleasantly. "Would it be possible to move to a private dining room? I believe we'll be needing some privacy." Within minutes, we were seated in a small room typically reserved for business dinners. The round table forced us all to face each other. Daniel and Madison sat side by side, no longer touching, while Nathan and I completed the world's most uncomfortable double date. "So," I began, pouring water for everyone with surreal calm, "I suppose I should start. 5 days ago, I discovered my husband has been having an affair with your fiancé, Nathan, for approximately 1 year." Nathan's knuckles were white around his water glass. "That's impossible." I pulled out my phone, though I didn't unlock it. I have screenshots of hundreds of messages. Photos from their trip to Chicago last May, the conference you couldn't attend, Madison, because of your grandmother's surgery. Photos from the hotel room. Madison's grandmother had died 3 years ago, I'd checked. There are credit card records. I continued conversationally. The charges at the Ritz-Carlton, the jewelry purchases, the weekend in Aspen when Daniel was supposedly at a legal retreat. Daniel reached for my hand. "Rachel, please, we can talk about this at home." I moved my hand away. "Why? You've had a year to talk to me at home. You chose to talk to Madison instead." "It just happened," Madison whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't mean for it to—" "To what?" Nathan's voice was sharp now, his shock crystallizing into anger. "To accidentally fall into bed together? To accidentally lie to the people you promised to love?" The waiter knocked, probably wondering if we were ready to order. I called out pleasantly, "We'll need a few more minutes." A few more minutes to dismantle 2 relationships, 2 futures, 2 carefully constructed lies. The truth had arrived at Lumiere, and it was ordering the destruction special. The private dining room felt smaller with each passing minute, like the walls were closing in on our tragedy. The untouched breadbasket between us seemed absurd, as if anyone could eat while their life unraveled. "How long have you known?" Daniel asked, his lawyer's composure finally cracking. 5 days, I replied, though I suspected for months. You know what's funny? I teach strategic management. I tell my students to always look for patterns, inconsistencies, data that doesn't align. But when it came to my own marriage, I ignored every principle I teach. Nathan hadn't moved in several minutes, staring at Madison like she was a stranger. "The wedding postponement," he said suddenly. "You said you weren't ready, that you needed more time to be sure." "Nathan," Madison started. "Was it because of him?" His voice broke on the last word. Madison's silence was answer enough. I pulled out a folder I'd brought. Yes, I'd prepared visual aids for my marriage's funeral. Would you like to see the timeline I created? It's quite thorough. There's the first lunch on March 15th last year, the first hotel receipt on May 22nd, the weekend trips that coincidentally aligned with Nathan's marathon training schedules and my academic conferences. Daniel's face flushed. "You've been investigating me like I'm one of your case studies?" "No," I corrected. "I investigated you like you're my cheating husband. There's a difference. My case studies are theoretical. This is my life." "Our life," he corrected. "No, our life ended the moment you decided Madison's bed was more appealing than ours." The waiter knocked again. This time I let him in, ordering a bottle of wine with the same pleasant demeanor I used for faculty meetings. He sensed the tension and retreated quickly. "I want to know why," Nathan said suddenly, looking at Madison. "Just tell me why." Madison was sobbing now, mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. "I don't know. Daniel was just different, exciting. He made me feel special?" I supplied helpfully. "Desired? Like you were the only woman in the world?" "Yes, he's good at that. He did the same thing with me 20 years ago, and probably with others in between." Daniel turned on me. "There were no others." "Oh, so I should be grateful you only destroyed our marriage once?" Nathan stood abruptly. "I need air." "Sit down," I said quietly but firmly. "We're not done." Something in my tone made him sink back into his chair. I'd used my professor voice, the one that could silence a room of hungover undergraduates. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Daniel, you're going to go home tonight and pack your things. You'll be out by tomorrow morning. I've already changed the locks, so don't bother trying your key." "You can't just..." "I can, and I have. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery does affect asset division. Your law partners will find this situation particularly interesting, don't you think? Especially since Madison works for the firm. What's your company policy on senior partners sleeping with junior employees?" Daniel went pale. Madison gasped. "You wouldn't," he said. "I'm not vindictive," I assured him, "but I'm also not a doormat. You'll get a fair division of assets. The house is mine. My inheritance paid the down payment. You can have your precious BMW and your investment portfolio, but you will not fight me on this." I turned to Nathan. "Whatever you decide about your relationship is your business, but you deserve to know that this wasn't a momentary lapse. This was a year of deliberate choices, a year of lies." The wine arrived. I poured 4 glasses, raising mine in a mock toast. "To truth, may it set us all free." Only I drank. "I loved you," Daniel said quietly. "I still love you." "No," I replied. "You love the idea of me. The wife who keeps your life organized, who hosts your dinner parties, who makes you look good at firm events. You love what I do for you. But love me? Love requires respect, Daniel. And you can't respect someone you lie to every single day." Madison reached for Nathan's hand. He jerked away like her touch burned. "We should go," she whispered. "Yes," I agreed. "You should. But first," I placed a hotel key card on the table. "I've booked a room at the Marriott. It's under my name, Daniel. Don't come home tonight, or any night after." The sound of chairs scraping against hardwood was deafening. Madison fled first, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. Nathan followed more slowly, pausing at the door. "Thank you," he said simply, "for telling me." I nodded. "You deserve to know." The hotel room was sterile and perfect. No memories embedded in the walls, no ghosts in the corners. I stood at the window looking down at Denver's lights and finally let myself cry. Not the pretty tears of movies, but body-shaking sobs that left me gasping. I cried for the woman who'd walked down the aisle 17 years ago, radiant with certainty. I cried for every night I'd blamed myself for our distance. I cried for the future I'd planned, retirement travels, grandchildren, growing old with someone who knew all my stories. But mostly, I cried for the simple fact that I'd loved him. Truly, deeply, stupidly loved him. The knock came around midnight. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, looking as wrecked as I felt. I didn't know where else to go. I let him in. We sat on opposite ends of the small couch, two strangers united by betrayal. "She's at her sister's," he said. "Keeps calling. I don't know what to say to her." "You don't have to say anything tonight." "How are you so calm?" I laughed, gesturing at my ruined makeup. "Do I look calm?" "You were. At dinner, you were like a surgeon." "Anger comes in stages," I explained. "First, there's the white-hot rage, then the cold planning, then this. Tomorrow, I'll probably want to key his car. Next week, I might burn photos. It's a process. I don't even know how to start that process." We talked until dawn. Not about them. They didn't deserve any more of our time. We talked about ourselves. Nathan told me about proposing to Madison on a mountain trail, how sure he'd been. I told him about finding Daniel's messages, the physical sensation of my world tilting off its axis. "The worst part," Nathan said, "is that I feel stupid. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them." "We see what we need to see to survive," I offered, "until we can't anymore." Over the following weeks, Nathan and I developed an odd friendship. Coffee on Saturday mornings, comparing notes on divorce lawyers, sharing the surreal experience of dismantling lives we'd thought were permanent. Madison had moved out of their apartment. Daniel had lawyered up, predictably. The firm had placed Madison on administrative leave pending an investigation. Office affairs between senior partners and junior staff were, apparently, frowned upon. "I'm selling the apartment," Nathan told me over cappuccinos. "Too many memories." "I'm keeping the house," I countered, "making new memories." And I was. I'd turned Daniel's office into an art studio, finally taking the photography classes I'd always postponed. I'd painted the bedroom a deep teal, a color he'd always hated. I'd adopted a cat, something he'd been allergic to. Small rebellions, but mine. The divorce negotiations were swift. Daniel didn't fight me on the house or much else. Guilt, I discovered, was a powerful negotiating tool. Madison and Nathan's engagement dissolved even faster. No marriage to legally untangle, just a wedding website to delete and deposits to forfeit. "You know what's strange?" Nathan said one evening. We'd graduated from coffee to occasional dinners. "I'm grateful. Not for what happened, but for knowing. I could have married her, had kids with her, built a whole life on a lie." "Silver linings," I agreed, though mine felt razor-thin some days. Daniel tried to reconcile twice. The first time he showed up with flowers and tears, begging for counseling. The second time he sent a letter. 5 pages of justifications dressed up as apologies. I didn't respond to either. Madison reached out once, a text at 2 a.m. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt anyone." I deleted it. Intent mattered less than impact, and the impact was total destruction. 3 months after Lumiere, I stood in my kitchen making coffee when I realized I'd gone a whole hour without thinking about Daniel. A whole hour of being present in my own life, not mentally replaying scenes from our marriage, searching for clues I'd missed. Progress isn't linear. Some days I wanted to hide under covers and mourn. Other days I felt electric with possibility. Most days fell somewhere in between. A quiet rebuilding, brick by brick, of a life that was entirely mine. Nathan texted that evening. "Ran my first marathon since everything. Felt like flying." I smiled, responding, "Took my first real photograph today. Felt like seeing." We were learning to transform pain into something else. Not healing, exactly. Too early for that. But movement. Forward motion. The beginning of beginning again. 6 months after Lumiere, I hardly recognized my own life. The house, once our house, now decidedly mine, had transformed. Where Daniel's sports memorabilia once dominated, my photographs now hung. The formal dining room we'd used twice a year became my workspace, constantly cluttered with prints and editing equipment. "You're glowing," my colleague Sarah noticed at a faculty meeting. "What's your secret?" "Divorce," I said simply, enjoying her startled laugh. Nathan and I had evolved from fellow survivors to genuine friends. Our Saturday coffees became hiking trips. Our careful conversations became easy banter. We were both dating other people. Nothing serious, just testing the waters of being single again in our 40s. "Met someone on Tuesday," he told me during a trail run. "Marketing director. Nice, but she laughed at everything I said." "Even your coding jokes?" "Especially my coding jokes. Red flag." I'd gone on my own series of awkward first dates. The investment banker who spent 2 hours explaining cryptocurrency, the English professor who criticized my wine choice, the perfectly nice accountant who bored me to tears. "Maybe we're being too picky," I suggested. "Or maybe we know what we don't want now," Nathan countered. He was right. Madison and Daniel had given us terrible gifts wrapped in betrayal. Clarity about our own worth, knowledge of our non-negotiables. The leaves were changing when Nathan called with news. "Madison's engaged." I was grading papers. Red pen paused mid-correction. "Oh? Some guy from her hometown?" My former business partner saw it on Facebook. 3-carat ring, beach proposal, the works. "How do you feel about that?" A long pause. "Like I dodged a bullet. Is that terrible?" "No," I assured him. "That's growth." Daniel had started dating too, a paralegal from another firm, according to the gossip network. 25 years old, blonde, perky. The cliché was almost comforting in its predictability. But these updates barely rippled my surface anymore. I was too busy living. My photography had evolved from hobby to passion. I'd shown work at a local gallery, sold several prints, started teaching workshops on weekends. The woman who'd once dimmed herself to fit Daniel's shadow was learning to shine. One October evening, almost exactly a year after discovering the affair, Nathan and I sat on my deck sharing a bottle of wine. The air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot, the city lights twinkling below. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous. I'm serious." He turned to face me. "We've been dancing around something for months." My heart stuttered. We'd been careful, so careful, to keep things platonic. Two broken people learning to be whole. Adding romance felt like risking our hard-won peace. "Nathan, hear me out. We know each other's worst moments. We've seen behind all the curtains. There's no pretending, no perfect first impressions to maintain. What if that's not baggage? What if that's foundation?" I studied him in the porch light. Same kind eyes, but steadier now. Same gentle demeanor, but with new confidence. We'd both been refined by fire. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Good. Me too. But I'm more scared of missing this because we're too careful. We could ruin our friendship. Or we could build something better." I thought about the last year. The controlled demolition of my old life. The painstaking reconstruction. The woman I'd become in the process. Braver, clearer, uncompromising about truth. "Okay," I said quietly, "but we go slow, glacial. And the minute either of us feels unsafe, gaze. We stop," he agreed. "Full stop, no questions." Our first kiss was nothing like first kisses are supposed to be. No fireworks, no sweeping passion, just quiet recognition. Coming home after a long journey. "For the record," Nathan said, pulling back, "this is terrible timing. We're both rebounding. Every relationship expert would say we're doomed." "Probably," I agreed. "But we're not exactly poster children for conventional wisdom." We took it slow, as promised. Coffee became coffee and holding hands. Hiking became hiking and kissing at scenic overlooks. We fought about pace, about fear, about whether we were healing together or just hiding in familiarity. But something real grew in the space between caution and hope. Not a rebound, not a bandage over old wounds. Something entirely new, built on radical honesty and the mutual understanding that love wasn't enough without respect, that pretty words meant nothing without matching actions. "I love you," Nathan said one snowy morning, simple as breathing. "Not despite what we've been through, because of how we've handled it." "I love you too," I replied. "Turns out that's the easy part." Professor Williams' retirement party was the kind of elegant affair academics throw when one of their own finally escapes committee meetings and grade disputes. The university club sparkled with fairy lights and forced conversation. I almost didn't go. Too many memories of attending these events as Daniel's wife, playing the supportive spouse. But this was my mentor retiring. So I put on a new dress, emerald green, bold, nothing like the safe neutrals of my past life, and walked in alone. I was 2 sips into mediocre champagne when I saw him. Daniel stood near the bar, looking older. His hair had more gray, his surgeon-precise appearance slightly rumpled. The young paralegal wasn't with him. He was talking to Professor Martinez, but his eyes found me the moment I entered. I didn't flee, didn't freeze, just continued my conversation with a colleague about curriculum changes, letting Daniel approach at his own pace. Rachel. His voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. You look well. I am well. The photography? I saw your exhibition announcement. Congratulations. Thank you. We stood in awkward silence, 2 people who'd once shared everything now struggling with small talk. I owe you an apology, he said finally. A real one, not the self-serving letters I sent before. You don't owe me anything anymore, Daniel. I do. I destroyed us. Destroyed everything. He paused, seemed to gather himself. Madison left me 3 months ago. For someone else. I suppose there's karma in that. I felt no satisfaction at his pain. No vindication. Just a distant sympathy like hearing about a stranger's misfortune. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. It taught me what I put you through. The paranoia, the self-doubt, the constant wondering. I did that to you for a year. His voice cracked. I'm in therapy now, learning about myself. Why I sabotage good things. That's good, really. Are you happy? The question seemed to physically hurt him to ask. I considered lying, offering some platitude. But we were past that now. Yes, genuinely, surprisingly happy. Nathan appeared then, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He assessed the situation quickly, offering 1 glass to me while extending his hand to Daniel. Daniel, Nathan said simply. Daniel stared at Nathan's outstretched hand, understanding dawning. You two, yo? We're together, I confirmed, taking Nathan's free hand. Have been for a while. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The betrayed finding comfort in each other. The cosmic joke of it all. I suppose I deserved that, Daniel said quietly. This isn't about you, Nathan said, not unkindly. This is about us finding something good after something bad. It has nothing to do with deserving or revenge or karma. Daniel nodded slowly. Be good to her, he said to Nathan, then to me. I'm glad you're happy. I mean that. He walked away before I could respond, shoulders bent under the weight of consequences. You okay? Nathan asked. Yeah, weirdly, yeah. Later, as we walked to Nathan's car under a canopy of stars, I thought about forgiveness. Not the kind you give to others. I'd forgiven Daniel months ago, for my own peace. But the kind you give yourself. For not seeing the signs. For staying too long. For believing in something that was slowly poisoning you. Have I thanked Madison lately? Nathan asked suddenly. I laughed, surprised. What? For having an affair with your husband. Without that, we'd never have found this. That's deeply twisted logic. Maybe, but I'm grateful. Not for the pain, but for where it led. I understood. We'd both been shattered and rebuilt ourselves differently. Better, maybe. Certainly stronger. And somehow, miraculously, we'd found each other in the wreckage. No more looking back? Nathan asked, opening my car door. No more looking back, I agreed. As we drove home, to his place where I'd been slowly moving my things, creating our space rather than his or mine, I thought about endings and beginnings. How sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing. I'd reserved a table next to my husband's affair. I'd brought my future with me, disguised as a stranger. Revenge had become revelation, had become rebirth. Sometimes the end of the world is just the start of a better one.